On these busy streets in the hub of downtown Atlanta is the historic Rialto Center for the Arts. Right now, we're going to take a deep look into one of the South's cultural centerpieces.
If you wanna hear my story, then settle back and just sit tight while I start reviewing the attitude of doing right.
I'll never forget the first time I stepped inside the Rialto. I was an upcoming freshman, and the beauty of everything from the lighting to the stage solidified my school choice in Georgia State. Because a school that owns an art center this beautiful is surely invested in the arts, and was where I wanted to be. Here's to 100 years of dedication to architecture, culture, and the arts.
It's a venue where the university shows its best in music. It brings the best in music from the world of different genres, but it also gives it a space for the Atlanta community to come to campus and have its own activities.
It's really finding a way to have all these art forms have impact on people in Atlanta, for them to realize how important art is in their lives.
The Rialto Theater at this location, because it was the center of an entertainment district. Well, there are, maybe you could say, 3 Rialtos, and the original building at this location opened in April of 1916, and it opened as the Piedmont Theater. It was built at a time when there was a transition from live theater to the motion picture. Coming to the theater was just part of what one did, either to a matinee or to an evening show. The thrill of the motion picture was a new medium that had to be experienced.
Downtown Atlanta in the 30s and 40s was the central business district. So you had major business offices, you had a thriving restaurant scene, you had nightclubs, and so on and so forth. And it's a place where people lived as well as worked. Movie theaters are always located near where people are either working or living. More likely where they're living, you have streetcar lines that take people to central commercial districts to do shopping and so on and so forth. And so it was absolutely thriving at that time. Rialto had some premieres of its own. One of them was Who Killed Aunt Maggie. This was based on a local journalist's novel. She was friends with Margaret Mitchell. She wrote this novel. It was adapted into a very low budget, like No Stars movie. Another premiere was in 1951, Drums in the Deep South. This is a story about 2 friends who wind up on opposite sides in the Civil War, and one of their girlfriends tries to prevent them from killing each other.
Atlanta's a powder keg. They're calling up the militia.
Ever since I was a child, I've been hearing that sort of talk. It'll blow over.
And they're calling all West Point men to active duty.
Well, I say, do uniform. I'll go to Atlanta with you and watch you march in the parade.
So that was it was a benefit for the American Cancer Society's Georgia division, so on and so forth. They had a Miss Southern Belle contest from around the South, not just Atlanta contestants. And so that was kind of a big deal. Another premiere was a film in 1958, The Proud Rebel, which was based on a novel about 2 Atlanta-based characters, a father and son, who moved to the Midwest and have difficulty adjusting away from the Southern lifestyle and encounter regional prejudice against them for being Southerners.
There were white-only theaters, and the Rialto was a white-only theater. There were segregated theaters, and the Fox is an example of that. And so there's the third type of theater, and that was the theater that served the African-American population, like the 81 on Decatur Street.
The options for black movie lovers at the time were these colored theaters, but then also the balcony of the Fox Theater, which did have a black seating segregated section behind a bar. But there was a big debate in the black community about whether one should patronize a theater that has segregated seating.
If you look at the Fox Theater, you had this big, magnificent theater, and even though you have Jim Crow in place, you still want to experience it because it's a fantastic theater. The balcony area where African Americans were actually confined to was referred to as the crow's nest because of Jim Crow. It was 131 steps to enter into the building. Even though you had this segregated area, you actually had the best seat in the house.
It was before 1957, probably 1956. A young man asked me out on a date, and he was trying to be impressive and take me to a nice theater, and he brought me to the Fox Theater. We came in this entrance. I felt really special being up here till my father told me I wasn't supposed to be here. My dad asked me what movie I had seen, and I told him. He said, well, that's not playing at the Ashby Theater or what have you. Where in the world did you go? And I told him, I went to the Fox Theater. He said, you went in the back door. That's a segregated theater. He was very, very upset about it. And he said, you're never to go back there. And you don't go in the back door of places. If you can't walk in the front door, you don't go in.
The active phase of the civil rights movement in Atlanta is called the Atlanta Student Movement, and it began in the spring of 1960. And so theaters were an important part of the focus because that was where the color line existed.
You know, when we look at the civil rights movement in regards to the push from the youth to integrate public facilities, we almost always think about the Greensboro Four and how they integrated the lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina. But prior to that, Atlantans, blacks and whites, actually pushed for the integration of public theaters.
So the desegregation of the Rialto was part of a citywide effort at desegregation of public spaces. And this was part of a movement that originated with Atlanta University's center students.
You had students and professors coming together in order to integrate public facilities. In the late 1950s, Howard Zinn and his female students, they actually attempted to integrate several theaters here in Atlanta. So here you have this Jewish professor with a group of a dozen or 24 black women, and they actually go to the movie theater to try to integrate it. If there was a live performance, they would actually go to the front row, and unfortunately, they had to hear these obscene words from those who actually opposed this Jewish man being the presence of these black women at the movie theater. But at the same time, they were upset because blacks were pushing to integrate these spaces within the public sphere.
Atlanta's key to approaching desegregation was, in Mayor Hartsfield's phrase, go, but go slow. And also, let's avoid anything confrontational. There was discussion about not having like a bunch of black patrons come to one white movie theater at once. Let's do this quietly. So it was actually done very quietly over a weekend in May in 1962. And the newspapers reported that 4 or 5 students from the AUC had actually gone to a white theater and effectively desegregated it.
In regards to audiences being able to use these spaces together was probably slow. The Rialto was one of the last places to be able to do that.
I mean, at the same time, the downtown theaters are slowly closing. They're disappearing, again, because of demographic changes, white flight. Fewer and fewer people are living downtown. I mean, it's funny when you look at the history of the Rialto, because it opened and closed and changed management. And by the 1980s, the Rialto is basically showing, it's considered an action house. They're showing Bruce Lee and Sylvester Stallone movies. You're seeing some of the blaxploitation films appearing there.
Shaft, hotter than Bond, cooler than Bullet. Rated R. If you want to see Shaft, ask your mama.
So I've really seen the full transformance of the Rialto. So when I was a kid, we actually used to sneak down to the Rialto to see all the R-rated movies. There weren't many movie theaters in the city. And so at the Rialto, we could go down there and for like I think it's about 50 cents or maybe it was $1. We could go to the movie theater and see like all the Kung Fu movies that we weren't supposed to see, all the throwback movies from the 70s, Foxy Brown, all those movies our parents did not want us to see.
Pam Grier, that one chick hit squad who creamed you as coffee, is back to do a job on the mob. as Foxy Brown.
Sounds like a public menace.
Sure do.
The other thing was watching Richard Pryor. He was probably one of the funniest people that I'd ever seen. And then, of course, he did a lot of things that young kids think are hilarious. So he loved curse words, things like that. And so we just thought it was really fun.
No! Alahna!
Come on, get out!
Damn you! You did it for us!
I think more than that, it was just an opportunity for our friends. We would all get together and we would all walk down there. So we would walk from like Simpson Road, Ashby. It'd be like 10 or 12 of us, and we were all latchkey kids. And so I think it really helped us not get in trouble because we had somewhere to go and we could stay down there all day and then not have, kind of an idle mind.
The downtown theaters like the Rialto and the Fox began to lack economic viability. So what theaters like the Rialto and the Fox had to do was to reverse and go back to live entertainment, and that's what Georgia State University did.
It was a movie theater. So the challenge was, how do you convert a movie theater, which is not designed for performance, into a performance space? What they had to do was gut the entire building, take out everything they could and just leave the concrete walls. And they really had to leave the original concrete that was there from the movie theater, and this was the third or fourth building that Rialto had been in, but always on this corner for 100 years, always on the corner of Forsyth and Lucky Streets.
Former director of Georgia State School of Music, Dr. Richard Kohler, saw the Rialto as an opportunity to move the school to the then vacant district of Fairleigh Poplar. Dr. Kohler felt in his heart that this move would allow Georgia State to make significant contributions to Atlanta's diversity in culture and arts.
Well, I came to Georgia State a long time ago. It was 1992. And one of the first things that happened to me was I met a fellow by the name of Dick Kohler. He was running the School of Music. And he had this wild and crazy idea that he would buy a building in the Fairleigh Poplar area and it'd become the School of Music. And I said, well, that sounds like a good idea. So where's this money coming from, Dick? He hadn't figured that out. So one of the very first projects we did at Georgia State was to raise the money for the Rialto. And it's probably, if I look back at my time here at Georgia State, it was probably one of the best things we ever did.
So I think it has really helped to transform Fairleigh Poplar area. I think it was a major influence on that. Before the Rialto was purchased by the university and renovated, that was a pretty sketchy area. There weren't any restaurants there, there was a lot of vagrancy there. And I think the Rialto being on that corner helped to really regentrify that entire area.
There really was not a lot of activity, not a lot of businesses that were active in the Fairleigh Poplar area, certainly not proximal to the Rialto. And so the Rialto not only has, brought life back to itself since the renovation and the opening as part of Georgia State, but then businesses have grown up around it. The Landmark Diner right across the street. Broad Street today is much more active and vibrant than it was 20, 30 years ago. So I think it's driven some of the development in terms of other venues for people to go to, particularly eateries in that area, as well as the Balzer Theater right next door. So I think it's been a positive development in that way for the city, and particularly for the Fairleigh Poplar district.
In fact, if it hadn't been for the Rialto, a lot of Georgia State's development probably would not have occurred, because by coming over into the Fairleigh Poplar area, it showed that we could move across Peachtree Street, and it was going to be a dynamic, safe area. Students would be happy to come over here and have a good time. We could get people to come back downtown, and all of that worked. That's what the Rialto did.
I also think gentrification can be challenging because people see it as displacing. And I don't think that the Rialto has done that. The Rialto is a place that has been inclusive to bring everyone together.
This area of the city right here, this is the historic heart, the center, the epicenter of this city. It all starts from here and works out this way. So this is the heartbeat. It's like your heart has arteries. That's what this neighborhood is.
Rialto is where Atlanta meets the world. That's what the Rialto means to me. It's a unique venue. It's a historic venue, as I think people recognize. It was taking a historic building that one time was the largest movie theater in the Southeast, once had the largest marquee south of New York City, and taking it and repurposing it.
I knew how important the arts were to not only to a university, but to the city. So it was the fact that the arts are important, and that by redeveloping the Rialto, we could bring people downtown. It could become a center for student activities. It would just perform so many things so many great things for the university.
Chairman Dahlberg and President Patton first started it. They built that acoustically as a state-of-the-art facility, and it is. The musicians all are very, very excited about playing there.
I've been working at the Rialto a year and some change now. I applied here at the suggestion of my grandfather because he thought it would be a great place for me to interact with different artists and to be a part of Georgia State's community, you know, downtown and everything that's going on. And it really has. I've met some amazing artists working here, and I'm able to give them my CD and tell them about my music, you know? So these are connections that I might never make, you know, unless I had gone to their shows somewhere else, but they're brought right here to me working here, so it's awesome. It's an awesome place.
A lot of what the normal viewer would say, oh, aren't those beautiful panels on the sides of the walls, were very interestingly done architecturally, kind of like a patchwork, but they all have to do with sound. So there really is purpose for all of the decor that you see when you come into the space.
And I think the interior is very striking. It's a great use of color, or just a great play of materials. The walls have soundboards that reflect the acoustics well, but they're colorful. The seats, the carpeting, it's all very colorful. Brilliant red curtain. I think the brilliance of the theater is also what struck people.
The acoustics in the building are superb, and that's what I really remembered, is the quality of the acoustics, and that every seat is a good seat.
It's beautiful, right? So I think when we were attending in the mid-70s, right, it had to be like about to be demolished. Just like, it was this old facility. You could see the springs in the seats. It was this really bad fabric in there. I mean, it was definitely a theater that was needing desperate repair. And now it's this wonderful, beautiful facility.
It's really a finance story. When we developed the building, the idea was, of course, to put as much as we could into the interior to make it a great performance space. So we have good acoustics, good seating, good lighting. And we just used the budget for that, and thinking that, well, later on we will add a marquee. And I always thought there were a couple things that were important for the Rialto. One is to have a curtain that goes up. Not a curtain that goes sideways, but a curtain that goes up. Because we all know the phrase, you know, the curtain is rising. So that was something important to me, and we got that. And I also thought we needed to have a marquee. You need a marquee on a building that really stands out and catches people's attention. So after the project was well underway and it was developed and we revamped an old marquee, we were able, through the Georgia State University Foundation, to come up with additional funding that allowed us to put up the nice marquee. And I think that makes a great statement on the building.
When you walk in, you see a glassed-in space opened out onto the street. The beautiful thing about our lobby is you know exactly where you are. I mean, there is no doubt you are in the heart of a central, thriving district.
The thing I remember most is bringing people here as friends of the university or donors who hadn't been downtown in, say, certainly 20 years, maybe 10, probably 20 years. People would come here, they remember the Rialto as being a little old theater, and when they would come into the Rialto, they would gasp. They would just be taken aback. And I think of all the memories, it's just the awe that people saw when they came in here. I think they sometimes just took their breath away. Because they remembered as a little theater they may have gone to see a movie or two with their parents, but they hadn't been here in years, and it was just nothing like they had seen before.
It's fantastic to be part of Georgia State because Georgia State's committed to downtown. We're committed to downtown. We were cited here by the former president of Georgia State in order to turn around this neighborhood, which we have. And people who've been here a long time can say, you wouldn't believe what it was like when the Rialto was a movie theater running kung fu movies, and it was not a place you wanted to be downtown in that neighborhood at all. The whole idea was always to open out into the world, into the community, and bring people to Georgia State so that we might end up being the first place they touch within Georgia State.
The Rialto is used by a lot of the other departments at Georgia State. It's a little different because it's not only part of the academic institution, it's also a performing arts space that's really accessible to the entire city. But we are definitely working on ways to make it more accessible to have students come and participate a lot more there.
We were searching around for what wasn't being done in the community at large, and we found that there was a huge increase in the international demographic in the metro area, as well as Georgia State's campus being one of the most diverse in the whole university system, if not the most diverse. So because of that, we felt that we really had an obligation to serve a community that perhaps wasn't being served through a mainstream performing arts center.
You have to program not for the sake of being diverse, but you have to program for the art. And you have to see the beauty in all cultures, because you can just put something on stage to say you're diverse, but it might not be representative of the culture. And you have to be very conscious of the culture and what it brings in terms of art.
We literally bring in acts from around the world here to Atlanta to expose people to a variety of genres, if you will, of music and dance. And it's able to do that not only by bringing in established acts, but also the Rialto has developed somewhat of a brand for bringing in acts before they get discovered. Acts that are, like the Trey McIntyre Project or Angelique Kidjo. Acts that were already known within critical circles, people that, that were real big fans of those particular genres, but had not yet reached more public acclaim. And they come to the Rialto, and a few years later you realize, well, these acts have hit it big time. And so the Rialto adds that to Atlanta, it adds that to the campus.
I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, I just like the river. I've been running ever since. It's been a long.
It's a very alive place to be. Then if, for example, you're coming to a show, if it's a series show, there'll be a pre-show talk. So you might be listening to a professor telling you the origins of the African presence in Brazil and its importance in politics prior to a performance by Ballet Folclórico da Bahia. Then you'll go to that performance and you'll see amazing things that are rarely seen outside of the country or that particular culture that are being shared with this audience. And at the end of the show, the company literally leaves the stage, parades through the audience, and leads the entire house out onto the street. And so there's an impromptu street party.
The Rialto is a little avant-garde, right? So it's not necessarily the Fox, which has to do all the mainstream theaters. They have space to be able to bring things in that other theaters don't, and I think that's really significant. A big theater with a community theater feel.
You are in an academic setting, and we want you to learn about the cultures, and part of our mission is to inspire, educate, and entertain. And with that, it becomes an immersive experience.
You go consistently to the Rialto, every performance will have a different audience. It's fascinating. We were at Che Molambo a couple weeks ago. That's an Argentinian dance company. These guys are unbelievable. And there was a whole Latin American community there. When the Shaolin Warriors were here, it was Asian and Southeast Asian audience. When they're jazz, it's a whole different thing. So you really see the diversity of Atlanta in the audience that supports it.
Most memorable would probably be the Buena Vista Social Club out of Cuba. The Rialto was the first place that they came after Carnegie Hall. They were a huge sensation at Carnegie Hall, went back to Cuba, and then everyone clamored for them in the United States. And they were the subject of a wonderful motion picture, Buena Vista Social Club. And so it was a big deal for them to not only come to the United States, but to be at the Rialto in Atlanta for their first ever U.S. performance outside of Carnegie Hall. So it was a fantastic experience for me as an audience member. And to see this group, know what I knew about it, and the exuberance in the audience was amazing. I mean, people stood up and had Cuban flags in their hands and waved the flags. People danced spontaneously. It was just amazing. And those are the kinds of experiences that I think hook people and why they keep coming back.
Rialto Center, voy para marcar.
personally in our family, it touches anywhere from my mom, right? She just went to go see Diane Reeves, her and my aunt. They thought that was a really cool thing. All the way down to my kids, who I mentioned are 7, and it engages them. We went to go see a show last year called Step, and it was this kind of based on Black Greek fraternity stepping, and they thought it was the most wonderful thing in the world. So I think whether you're 90 or 9, the Rialto has something for you.
They have a program called Jazz for Kids that works with music teachers in middle schools.
1, 2, 2, 3, 4. The program is with 5 metro area middle schools. We visit each school once a month and we teach them how to play jazz. From these 5 partner schools, the best are recommended to come to our All-Star program, and they come here every Saturday morning, and that's the group that you see at the Atlanta Jazz Festival. It's a big band.
Is the Rialto Jazz Ensemble ready?
What I'm most proud about is that I have an opportunity to play here in front of a lot of people.
When that first tune starts and they hear the sound, they see all these people out in the audience, they're just ecstatic. They can't even see straight. My job is to focus that energy into the music. Usually when a child comes to us in 6th or 7th grade, we can usually tell that this little one has something special. It could be their attitude, it could be the way they play, or something in their personality, or just a sparkle in their eye. We can usually tell. And I have students that have gone through the program that are at Berklee College of Music, that are at Juilliard.
My daughter's, she's a trombone player. Jazz allows her to interpret her feelings and possibly get some things out that she would normally have to just say in words. Well, now they can come through her horn.
We get to really express ourselves, and we get to do it with a bunch of our friends and have a great time. You can't be nervous when you're having this much fun.
Well, anytime that you're part of something that has existed much longer than you have, it's really a special opportunity and a treat. It bears a great sense of responsibility as well. I mean, for something to have lasted 100 years, it must have a durable value. And so for me, it's as much as it's exciting, it's a responsibility that we continue to make sure that the Rialto is a real crown jewel for Atlanta in the arts.
There's so many things that make the Rialto special. We present the best in world music, dance, and jazz. And I think when you come to a Rialto show, that is more than a show, it's an experience. We encourage you to immerse yourself in the performance.
I've always loved the Rialto, and I never thought I would come to work here or have that opportunity, but it's been probably one of my greatest work opportunities that I've ever been able to take advantage of. I've loved being here, and it's great to be a part of Georgia State, to watch downtown transform, and to see what we're able to do on our stage, bringing people together for unexpected experiences.
Sometimes when I'm directing a group in the Rialto and there's a magic moment that does something that's so amazing, we're all like, it's a magical moment, and you never know when that's going to come. And when it does, you just hope that you're open to receive it.
Come to the Rialto to see something you've never seen before and walk away amazed. It is where Atlanta meets the world. It's a place that you get to see acts, performances that are definitely worth seeing, will open your horizons to new art forms, and at the same time, you get to do it right here at Georgia State University.
Because I think when the history of Atlanta is written, there's going to be a chapter that talks about keeping the lights on downtown, and the Rialto is going to be the center of that chapter.
We hope you enjoyed this look into the ongoing history of the Rialto Center for the Arts. For GSU TV, I'm Alahna Lark. Thanks for joining us.
Reviewing the attitude of doing right.